All right. Hello and welcome to the Middle East Forum Speaker Webinar Series and Podcast. I'm Stacey Roman and I will be moderating this discussion today. We are pleased to have Joseph Braude, President of the Center of Peace Communications in New York, join us to discuss Whispers in Gaza, Silenced Voices Made Audible. Mr. Braude will speak for 15 minutes and open it up for questions. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. And with that, I'll turn the discussion over to Mr. Joseph Braude.
Thank you, Stacey, and thanks to you and your colleagues for the invitation. Whispered in Gaza is a series of 25 videos in which current residents of the Gaza Strip candidly describe their lives under the rule of Hamas. They're not altogether happy about it. They describe Hamas as something resembling an occupying force, corrupt, brutal, that suppresses free expression and free enterprise, and essentially makes their lives miserable. They blame Hamas quite clearly for starting wars it cannot win and hiding in bunkers to leave civilians to suffer the casualties. We animated their voices using video animation in order to protect their identities. And the series has begun to have rather a significant effect, both in the Middle East and in the West. It's been viewed 5 million times on our platforms alone, and probably several million more through the media outlets we partnered with to distribute it. In this brief presentation, I'm going to tell you why and how we did this, what the outcomes have been thus far, and what we feel we have learned, what the implications are about this rather novel initiative to change the public discussion in, around, and about Gaza. Why and how did we do this? Hamas has placed the people of Gaza under what you might describe as a communications blockade. No one in Gaza is allowed to publicly express the slightest opposition to Hamas. Journalists who take an interest in the issue of internal dissent within Gaza find themselves threatened and deported from the Strip. And as a result, Hamas uses this brutal suppression to maintain narrative dominance of the story of Gaza and broader Israeli-Palestinian issues across the Arab world, through numerous media outlets that it controls or influences, and hundreds of Iran-backed channels in Arabic that play Hamas's tune. The result of this is, of course, to stymie civil society in the Arab world generally by selling a rather extremist narrative about what the region should be. And with respect to Israel, blocking people-to-people relations, both within countries at peace with Israel and in the broader region, because they're able to use the veneer of Gazan solidarity with Hamas to claim moral credibility in stigmatizing, isolating, ostracizing, and inciting against anyone who dares to call for human relations with Israel and its citizens. Meanwhile, in the West, this same information monopoly also projects the impression that Hamas and the people of Gaza are one. That fuels the campaign to delegitimize Israel. And it also obscures a humane and sane discussion about the future of Gaza, because it fosters the impression that, as I indicated, Gaza and the Palestinians of Hamas are one, and simply creates an imbalanced debate about what is happening there and how to change it for the better. Now, meanwhile, absent from all of these conversations is what Gazans actually think. And nearly every opinion poll conducted by Palestinians and outsiders of what Gazans do think and believe indicates that quite a few of them do not want to be ruled by Hamas, that they don't want Hamas or others in the territory to launch rockets at Israel, not because of any fondness for Israel, but rather that because they know what the ultimate result of that is and what it triggers in damage and destruction. Many, in fact, Gazans feel that they want a different kind of relationship with Israel. Some for pragmatic reasons, because they want to develop the Strip. Some for downright ideological reasons, in envisioning a more conciliatory relationship with the Jewish state. So we reasoned that if it were somehow possible to break Hamas's information monopoly and grant a global platform for actual Gazans to say what they actually believe to the world, then we could puncture Hamas narrative dominance within the region, embolden Gazans opposed to Hamas, and within the West, bring balance to a conversation about and a debate about what is actually happening there, and what it means that Hamas is actually the governing actor within the Strip. So we set out to do so. Over the course of 2022, we reached out directly to dozens of current residents of the Gaza Strip. We offered them a platform to communicate with the outside world, committing not to show their faces or reveal their names. And we proceeded to interview them on camera and obviously go through the many hours of footage. It was riveting and harrowing testimony, often quite difficult to engage on an emotional level. And what we saw was material that needed to come out. In order to protect their anonymity, we actually hired a team of animators, illustrators, and musicians to create digital animated videos based on their voices, technologically altered, and to sort of rather searingly reflect the stories that they tell. Before I go any further, I'd like to share with you an example of one of the 25 clips from Whispered in Gaza. Admittedly, the transmission via Zoom isn't quite as good as we might want, but I hope it'll give you a picture. I'm going to have to open Keynote here, if you'll bear with me for one moment. And just one sec. And here we go.
هم دخلوا علينا ب 2007 بكلمه الاصلاح والتغيير. هم دخلوا علينا بالاصلاح والتغيير، هم بالنهب، بالسرقه، بالذل، بالمهانه، بالواسطه، بقله فلوس، بقله فلوس العمل. ايش ضل تعمل عشان تنهي، تتعب وتنهب الشعب؟ اكثر من هيك احنا بنطمع فيه. ما فيش اي مشروع صغير، حتى لو كشف دخان او مشاريع مساهمه او خذ منه مش مصر. بس كثير يمكن ضرائب كبيره جدا. انت لما تروح هناك المكان اللي كان مجاني، اللي كان البحر ونقعد نشرب قهوه، القهوه كانت مثلا بشيكل، هالقد صارت بتروح مش مكان مجاني، لازم تقعد كافيه او مطعم، صارت هالقد القهوه ب3 شيكل واكثر. صار الشيء بغلوه عليه على صاحب الكافي، صاحب بيغلى عليه انتاجه فينا باسم حاجه. احنا كنا زمان ايام الانتفاضه الاولى والانتفاضه الثانيه كنا نقاوم، كنا نعمل اسم لكن هذه الشعب بطل يامن. هذه المقاومه صارت تجاره. موضوع الحروب اللي صارت في غزه 2018 هذه كلها اللي بياكلها بس الشعب. الناس اللي بنضروا الشعب اللي بيأذوا بس الشعب. كل ما صار حرب، كل ما دخلت مساعدات اكثر، كل ما هم استفادوا اكثر واحنا ما بنستفيد اي حاجه. هم بيكونوا يعني حصانين المخابئ تاعتهم، احنا اللي بناكلها احنا الشعب. بنقول ايش؟ انتصار. وين الانتصار؟ لما معظم امراض غزه نزلت، طب وين الانتصار لما كثير ناس فقدوا فرص؟ وين الانتصار لما معظم او كل شعب غزه راح؟ وين الانتصار؟ يعني.
Now, may I say that what you've just seen, as I indicated, not only reflects what as many as a majority of Gazans believe and feel, and is exactly what you hear if you sit in a coffee shop in Gaza and talk frankly to someone. It is also the spirit of a desire for something different that brought 1,000 brave young people to the streets of Gaza to demonstrate against Hamas in 2019, braving gunfire and prison. So this was a story that needed to be told. Having created the 25 clips, we translated them into a total of 7 languages. We reached content media sort of distribution partnerships with large media outlets in all of those languages, notably including Al Arabiya, Saudi Arabia's flagship news outlet. And we released the clips over a 3-week period beginning in mid-January and running to mid-February. Now, the results of that, what I'd like to tell you about next. As I mentioned before, the material, you might say it went viral. It reached, on our platforms alone, some 5 million people, and then several million more through our partners in media as well as social media. And it triggered new discussions in the Arab world, where our largest audience lives, on both sides of the Atlantic, in Latin America, and also in Iran. We translate it into Farsi as well. In Arab countries, there were expressions of outrage at these realities that were, for the first time, exposed in an Arab setting. People took to social media to publicly express a reevaluation, a rethinking of the story of Hamas and Gaza that they had passively received for all these years. We know that within Gaza, where our largest audience lives, approximately 750,000 people watch these videos. Meanwhile, in the West, we saw expressions of reevaluation of the polemics surrounding Hamas-Israel wars, a recognition of the fact that you can't really understand the reality of Gaza without grappling with Hamas as a governing actor. And we clearly posed a challenge to those who regard themselves as pro-Palestinian to distinguish or to choose between being pro-Hamas or being supportive of the Palestinians who suffer under Hamas rule. We consider all that, of course, to have been a positive development. And we were heartened on Thursday of last week when the Islamic Fatwa Council, a trans-sectarian body of senior Shiite, Sunni, and Sufi clerics headquartered in Iraq, issued the first ever fatwa, effectively declaring Hamas un-Islamic and illegitimate, and calling on believing Muslims not to pray for it, join it, fund it, or fight with it. So these outcomes, in our minds, suggest several things. First of all, we should not regard Hamas narrative dominance, whether in the region or elsewhere, as a fait accompli that it's not possible to do anything about. Although it is a David and Goliath situation in which Hamas controls a very powerful machinery of propaganda, it is possible through out-of-the-box innovative approaches to puncture their narrative and to do so on a grand scale. second point about it is that it is possible also to begin to change the frenzied polemics about Gaza in the West, and to pose a serious challenge to those who effectively, channel Hamas propaganda and use it, exploit it to advance BDS and other narratives that delegitimize Israel with reckless disregard for the interests of Palestinian and others who live under rejectionist rule. So that is where the situation stands at the moment. It is an ongoing project, and we look forward to moving it forward further and building on it in the months ahead. And I think I'll stop there and invite you to share your questions.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. First question in is from Daniel Pipe saying, thank you for the great presentation. Can you please tell us about the impact of the fatwa?
So it is a significant development. It is unprecedented, and it's important that it was issued by some senior figures in the region. A grand Ayatollah in the Iraqi spiritual capital of Najaf, the Sunni Grand Mufti of the Iraqi province of Wasit, and a venerated Sufi cleric in the Punjab region of Pakistan. Now, this is an independent body, not controlled by any state. However, the Grand Mufti holds an official position within Iraq that is a part of the structure of the state. The Grand Ayatollah commands a significant following among Shiite Muslims, and a delegation of the Islamic Fatwa Council went in January to Mecca to meet with the head of the Muslim World League, the Saudi Sunni Muslim World League, Muhammad al-Isa, which is a significant signal of appreciation for what this council is trying to do. Now, the attention to this fatwa has been massive and is crescendoing within the region and, of course, far beyond. So the argumentation and reasoning, which I think any scholar of Islamic law would deem to be airtight for the case against Hamas, is something that people are going to grapple with and challenge government fatwa issuing bodies in Arab and Muslim countries to decide whether they will affirm it, reject it, or be silent. And in Islamic law, silence constitutes acquiescence. And in these countries in which Sharia is a component of the legal system of the state, it becomes possible to introduce new kinds of challenges to Hamas members and assets in some of these countries. Most importantly, it is a further blow to Hamas legitimacy, which is, at the end of the day, if there's ever going to be change within Gaza, it's not going to come because Israelis are going to re-enter the territory, which plainly no one wants to do. And it has something to do with an internal process in which internal opposition to Hamas is empowered. So all of this is supportive of that gradual change that so many would like to see. And so we do believe that the impact of the fatwa is significant and promising.
Thank you so much. David S. Levine comments, the government of Iran is financing Hamas. What good is the condemnation of Hamas by a Shia cleric when this is the case? It's also Sunni, correct?
So it is, I'll begin by saying that the Farsi subtitled version of Whispered in Gaza, which was carried by a prominent Iranian opposition outlet, earned the third largest audience for Whispered in Gaza after the Arab world first and English-speaking countries second. And it was something that Iranian protesters through social media and Telegram and elsewhere were commenting on and saying, hey, we've been lied to for 2 decades. The money that our natural resources that were being spent on supposedly on defending and empowering Palestinians were in fact an ideological exportation of the same dictatorial extremist governance that we too are suffering under. So there's a new kind of identification amid the spirit of change in Iran. And of course, a grand Ayatollah in the Shiite spiritual capital of Najaf, which rivals Qom for leadership of Shiism globally, is a blow to Iranian government versions of Islam. So in that respect, it is a significant challenge also to Iranian clerical hegemony.
Thank you so much for that. Stephen Gerzoff asks, is this applicable to Judea and Samaria, West Bank? How do you get this more widely distributed by the EU, UK, US, and US Congress funding the Pay to Slay program?
Well, if we were to, what I will say, obviously, is that in the West Bank, Hamas has more than a foothold and has won a significant following for itself. One of the reasons why they've succeeded is that the isolation of Gaza is so absolute that in the West Bank, many Palestinians too don't really know what it's like to live there. And both whispered in Gaza and the subsequent outcomes in the public discussion and the religious discussion is giving West Bankers also an experience of that rule and causing them to think a little bit differently about Hamas. And we feel that that too is to the good. We're heartened to see Palestinian journalists watching the videos, writing about them, and grappling with their implications.
Thank you. An anonymous attendee says, talk is cheap. Why is it that all we see is terrorism aimed at Israel? You know, do you think we could see a journalistic change in journalistic narrative and see the damage that Hamas does to the Palestinian people? And if these efforts to overthrow Hamas happen, would Israel join?
Well, talk is deadly. Incitement and incendiary discourse can be transformative. Across the region, 70 years of brainwashing and indoctrination has poisoned the atmosphere for peacemaking, created an environment in which diplomats can come to trust each other across borders and innovate solutions to seemingly intractable problems, but not be able to bring their solutions to their population because of the rejectionist dominance of the public discussion. So talk needs to change. And you do that in this day and age through digital approaches to reach young people, through social media and so on, as well as traditional approaches of engaging legacy outlets, print, broadcast, and online alike, as well as institutions of spiritual and moral authority. So you might say on the one hand, that's all a lot of talk, but on the other hand, discourse is a crucial component of political change, which isn't going to happen through military intervention alone.
Absolutely. So you mentioned challenging the pro-Palestinian people who claim to be pro-Palestinian to choose whether they're pro-Hamas or pro-Palestinian people. How can that be applicable to college campuses? Judy Hirschon, as well as Deborah Gleiser, ask on that.
We believe that the message and the substance of Whispered in Gaza poses a constructive challenge, as I indicated, to people who conflate support with Hamas for support and support for the Palestinians. And so we do hope that students as well will share this material on college campuses and elsewhere. And we'll do what we can to encourage that.
Wonderful. Carrie Hillebrand asks, has a similar project been initiated to expose Hezbollah in Lebanon?
To date, no such project has been initiated. The Gaza project is the first of its kind. It's a new approach to giving a platform to silenced voices in the region. It does have implications for other places where proxy militias dominate, unwanted by the populations they rule. We're a small organization. We are working to grow, and we do intend, if we're able to, grow our operations, to build on this model in all kinds of different ways.
Absolutely, and we hope you succeed at that. Lisa Bernard asks, have participants been outed by anyone and suffered any reprisals, or might reprisals by Hamas be a risky recognition of the festering dissent and dissatisfaction?
There have been no reprisals to anyone. And we worked very hard to anonymize the visages and alter the voices. Now, indeed, the fact that we had to do that and that these people could not show their faces reflects the grim reality and the fear that Hamas has imposed on its population. There have been attempts, brave attempts, to speak to the world through social media, through a rare Zoom discussion between Gazans and Israelis that was public in 2020. The organizers of that discussion were jailed for months and eventually had to leave when they were finally let go. People who rear their heads on social media and identify themselves by name find themselves threatened, jailed, their families as well, and so on. And so we felt that there needed to be a different way to get these voices to be heard and to do so safely.
Absolutely. Carrie Hillebrand, again, sorry. If Hamas can be discredited, do you see any viable and palatable alternatives rising in Gaza?
The question of alternative leadership in Gaza is, of course, fraught. This is, like other dictatorships, a junta that has succeeded in mowing down much opposition. And the kind of Gaza that is envisioned by the young people who communicate through this series is a civil society. Now, how you get there is undoubtedly gradual, complex. It requires courage within the Strip. It requires solidarity and support from all over the world. It is not something that can happen overnight. But we felt that the first step was to embolden people within the Strip by showing them that their voices are being heard, that the world is listening, that there is sympathy and solidarity for these people. They didn't, they've always felt that nobody even knows how they feel and what they really want. So that's a first step. And we accompany the series with a monograph that you can read at peacecoms.org/Gaza, in which some distinguished policy voices reflect on the message of these videos in forward-looking essays on what this says about potential new directions for governance of the Strip.
Thank you. And speaking of the world listening, Carl Yessi asks, has this series been pitched to the UN and the ICC?
I believe that I've heard certainly expressions of hope that the UN and the ICC and other international bodies will also grapple with the substance of these videos. we certainly support all efforts to promote the message and the content in any country, in any language, and in any body, regardless of the politics or the views of that body. We feel that this is a meaningful and important message. It transcends conventional political divides, and people should examine it and grapple with it.
Thank you so much. And before we go, can you tell our viewers where we can find some more of your work, and specifically, again, where we can find these videos? So
our website is peacecomes.org. And the project page for the Gaza series is peacecomes.org/Gaza, where you'll find links to all the videos and research and documentation accompanying them, as well as the monograph and other interesting things.
All right, thank you so much. Sorry, I tried to put that in chat, but ended up putting it just in the host and panelists. All right, well, thank you so much. We've come to the close of our webinar. Thank you again, Mr. Braude, for joining us today.
Thank you, Stacey.
Of course. For our viewers, please join us Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern for an update with Ashley Perry. For any Israeli viewers, we did have our time changed, so that'll be 9 p.m. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you again.